All right, welcome back everybody to Full Stack Web Development for Beginners. All right, so last time we looked at how to protect ourselves from SQL injection attacks. So let's go ahead and move on from there. In this video, we're going to look at wiring up the edit book and remove book buttons over here. So let's get right into it. So first things first, we'll work on the remove book button first. And kind of how we want this to work is we want it to kind of prompt the user, like, are you sure you want to permanently remove this book, and then have them click confirm on like some kind of pop-up, rather than just when they click this it'll just remove the book. We want to give them some kind of like confirmation. So we'll do that in a Bootstrap modal pop-up. So I have the Bootstrap documentation website pulled up here, getbootstrap.com. If we come in here, we click documentation, go down to components, and let's look for Modal. There it is. So click Modal on the left, and basically we can just copy and paste some code. So let's look at a live demo of kind of how this would work. So click here. Yep, and this is kind of how it's going to be, a pop-up with close and confirm button. So let's go ahead and copy this code here. Just grab all of this, and then let's come into our code. Whoops, my server's running. I'll do a Control-C to stop the server. Let's go into our books handlebar template and scroll down to the very bottom of the file, and let's just paste that modal code all the way down here. And then I'll just say in the comment, start remove book modal, and then at the end I'll just have a comment just to keep the code kind of organized. Down here we'll say end remove book modal. And then we also kind of want to modify some stuff in here. So they're calling this example modal. Let's change ours to say, I'll just do Control D to highlight all the words of example, and we'll just say remove book. So now we have remove book modal label, and so on. So next we'll do the label here. Instead of that, we'll just say delete book. And then in the modal body here, we'll just put, are you sure you would like to permanently remove this book from your library, just to make sure they don't do something that they regret. And then let's see, the buttons down here, we'll say, we'll change close to cancel. That's more appropriate. And then let's see, button. So then for the save changes, we'll just change that to the word yes. And let's also give this button an ID of remove book confirm, because we're going to need to put a click event on this button in our client-side script. So do all that. Let's hit save, and yeah. Okay, so now that we have our modal pop-up in place, let's look at what we need to kind of modify up here in each of our books. So in the book cards list, we have a button down here for remove book. And since we're kind of looping through all of our books here in our search results, we need to store the ID of each book. So if I go back to our page here, for example, if they were to click like the fifth one down here, we need to know exactly which book they're trying to remove. So we need to have the ID of each book stored in this red X button. So let's see how we can store the individual IDs of each book in these remove book buttons. So we can add a data attribute. So I'll just call it data-book ID, and we'll set that equal to 2 curly braces and then the ID, because we already have each of the books IDs being passed into this handlebar template from our search books route, right? So pass in the ID, and then we'll also say data-toggle equals modal, and then data-target is going to be hashtag remove book modal. And that will ensure that when these remove book buttons are clicked, it will trigger this modal pop-up to kind of show up on the screen. And then let's go back up to, because we have one more remove book. This was for smaller screens, right? So the larger screen, here it is. So now we're looping through all of our books once again for the larger screen view. Let's do the exact same thing up here. So the remove book button is here. Let's do the same thing. So let's just copy and paste. So we had data book ID, data toggle, and data target. Copy all those attributes. And we'll come up here to this remove book hyperlink and paste it in there. Now let's go back to the books route. Let's look at how we can work on this delete book route down here at the bottom. First things first, we're passing in the ID of which, the ID of which book we want to remove. So let's go ahead and see how we can pull that out. So it'll be something like const ID, and we want to escape this in case there are some SQL code trying to be injected, and then it'll be rec.params.id. Notice how it's not rec.query, because this is not a query parameter. This is actually a URL parameter. So rec.params.id will pull out the ID, and then we'll need some SQL code to actually do the remove. So let's open up template literal, and we're going to run two commands here. One will be select title from book where ID equals, and then we'll just concatenate the ID. And that's so that we can get which book was removed. And now let's do the actual remove. So delete from book where ID equals, and then same thing, concatenate the ID. And then we'll close out that template literal string, come down here a little bit, and let's go ahead and create our error object. Okay, and then we'll do const delete result equals await pool.query, pass in our SQL string, catch any errors, set it equal to our error object, and then let's make sure that we pull back the correct data type using our get JSON function that we created up top. And this will only pull back those row data packets, which is what we want to pass to our handlebar template. Although in this case we're not using a template, but anyways, so const result equals get JSON delete result. Now let's go ahead and I'm just going to copy because it's a little bit similar. However, the delete book route is going to be kind of a RESTful type API endpoint, but let's see kind of what that looks like. So if there's an error, we'll do console.error SQL error, and then instead of doing a redirect or a render, we're going to do something a little different here. We're going to return some JSON. So let's do res.status, and if there's an error, we'll just say it was a 500 error, and let's pass back a JSON response. So we'll say fail is true because something went wrong, and then we'll pass back some message. There was a problem attempting to delete this book. Please try again. Okay, and if it was good and it all went through, let's do res.status, and it was at 200, which means we're good, and we'll pass back some more JSON fail false because we're good to go. And then for the message, let's do a template literal string, and we're going to pass back the title of which book was actually removed. So we'll do result of 0.title and then has been removed. And the reason it's result of 0 is because we're going to get back an array of objects, right? And since we're only pulling back one item, it's going to be an array of 1, and so we know that it's always going to be at index 0. That's why it's result of 0 and then .title. So this way we can pass back to the front end the title of the book that has been removed, and then in later videos we'll look at how to display these messages to the screen to let our users know exactly what happened. Next, we need to look at the script file. So over here in our public JS, we should have this script file that we haven't touched in a while. And let's come down here under the console log, and we need to add some stuff to remove a book. So first things first, we're going to want to attach a click event. So if we go back to the handlebar templates, we need to respond to a click event on all of these remove book buttons, right? We have one up here in our table and then a button down here on the screen for smaller screens. So let's attach a click event there. So we'll do something like, and we're going to use jQuery, so $, and then we'll do hashtag books hyphen table dot on click dot remove book, because that's the class name, And then we'll pass a callback function into here. Whoops, not 3. Let's put in an E for the event. I'll just call that event. And then let's do the exact same thing. So I'm going to copy this. That's for the larger screen view, and this will be for the smaller. So the smaller one was book cards list. Book cards list dot on click, remove book, callback function. Okay, so now we have click events. Let's go ahead and console log clicked. Make sure this is kind of working. Okay, let's go ahead and see really quick. So I'm going to do an npm start down here, and if we didn't screw anything up, we should be able to go back to the page. And okay, it worked. So let's go here, do a refresh, and let's pull up our console, and let's click this. Okay, it says clicked, and we also see our delete book pop up here, so that's also working. So I'm going to close that. So I'm going to clear our console. Let's go to a smaller screen to make sure that this one also works, and there it is, clicked. Okay, so our click event's working. Let's bring this back over. Let's go back into the code, and let's see what else we need to do here. So we need to be able to pass to our route here the ID of which book we want to get rid of, right? So if we remember in our books template, we set the ID of each book into this data attribute. So if we go back to the page, we can actually inspect and see that. So if we right click this button and click inspect, we'll see up here, data book ID 553. So this is the ID of this book that we need to pass if we want to remove it. So let's see how we can do that in our client-side script. So come back over here to the code. Let's pull up script.js, and let's create another function up here. I'm just going to call it const set data attribute, and this will be equal to, and we're going to pass in some HTML element, so that'll be our one argument there. And we're going to say const id equals elem.get attribute data-book ID, and this will pull out the book ID from whichever element was clicked, right? Next thing, well, let's hold off on that. So we need to call this function each time there's a click, right? So let's get rid of these console logs down here, and we'll say set data attribute, and we're going to pass in the event current target, and that kind of just basically means whichever HTML element was clicked on, it's going to be stored in the current target. So we'll call that with event.currentTarget, and we'll do the same thing in the other click event for the smaller screen. So set data attribute event.currentTarget, and then up here, now that we're passing in the correct element, right, and we're pulling out the ID, we now need to set that ID onto our remove book confirm button. So where was that button? Let's pull up our page one more time, and if we click one of these buttons, right, we have this yes button. Let's inspect that. So this is our remove book confirm button. So when they click this, we need to know the ID of the book that they're trying to remove, right? So if it was this first one here, it would be ID of 553, right? If it was the second one here, it would be an ID of 631. So depending on which one was clicked, we need to get that specific ID stored into this button, so that when they click this button, we can pass that ID to our route to get rid of the correct book, right? So let's do that. It was the remove book confirm button. Let's come back into the code, and in our set data attribute method, we're just going to do document .get element by ID remove book confirm .set attribute data-book ID, and we'll set it equal to the ID that we extracted from the button that was clicked. Hope that makes sense. Now that we have that, we can create a remove book function. So we'll do const remove book, and this is going to be an async function, and we're going to pass in another element, right? It's going to be that confirm button, and we're going to say const id equals get attribute, similar thing. We're going to get the data book ID out, and then we're going to do a try catch block here, because we're going to be doing some Ajax calls here using fetch. So const result equals await fetch, and this is going to be pointing at our /books/delete book route / and then we got to pass in the ID, and then it is method of delete. So don't forget to specify that, and this will actually hit this route with this ID, right? So this is going to be our delete book route. In here, right? Okay, so we got that. Next, once this comes back with our result, we need to convert that into some JSON. So I'll say const JSON response equals await result.json. So you can just convert the result into JSON and we'll store it into another variable, JSON response. Let's just console.log JSON response.message.msg, because if we come back to our route, what are we doing here in our response? We're passing back some message, right? Let's see if we can print that out to our console on the front end. So console log JSON response.message, and then last things to do in here is make that modal pop-up disappear again. So it'll be jQuery syntax, and we'll do remove book modal, we'll grab it by its ID, and we'll do .modal and then hide. And that's just Bootstrap for hiding a modal in our JavaScript. Okay, so that's all good. And then what if we have an error in our fetch call, right? Let's catch any errors that we might have, and we'll just say console.error, fetch error, and then print out that error. Leave it at that. There's one more thing we need to do. We need a click event for when this yes button is clicked, right? So let's come back in here. So down here at the very bottom, let's add and I'll just put a comment. I'll say this event triggered from remove book modal yes button, just to keep it clear. So let's attach a click event to that. We'll say hashtag remove book confirm .on click, and then callback function. And again, we're gonna say, close that parentheses there. We'll say remove book, and we'll pass in the event.current target, because that's what was clicked, and that's gonna have our book's ID attached to it. And once again, this remove book function is what we just wrote up here. So we're just calling this function to do the actual fetch call to remove that book. Okay, so let's save that, and our books route should be good. So let's go ahead and stop our server, Control-C, and then do an npm start it back up. Let's go back to the page and let's do a refresh here. And let's see if we can get rid of this first book here. So I'm gonna click, first I'm gonna pull up the console here. Click here. Yes, I'd like to delete it. Actually, first let's inspect our yes button. And there we go. Data book ID is 553. That checks out. Let's go back to the console, click yes, and there's our message. The book title and then has been removed. Perfect. So if I refresh the page, we should no longer see annuals and perennials garden designs. Refresh and it's gone. So it looks like delete book is working. Let's go back to the code to make sure that there's no errors in our terminal down here, and it looks like we're clean, good to go. Let's next quickly look at how to do the update book, get and post here. So first things, we're gonna need a new handlebar template. So come into our views here, and I'll just do new file, and we'll just call it update book.hbs. And I'll kind of leave this blank for now because we're not passing anything in here yet. Let's first work on the route, but it's good to have that file created. So starting up here with the get request. So let's first pull out that. So we're going to expect the book ID in our query string. So, and of course we're going to want to escape the value. So pool.escape and the rec.query.id. So let's pull that out, and then let's write some SQL to do the actual work. So let's see what we're going to need to grab here. Whoops. So yeah, so let's do some template literals, and we'll do select star from book where ID equals, and then we'll just concatenate the ID in here. So that'll get us the specific book record that our users are trying to get updated. And then we'll just do, where's that other route that we wrote? Let's just copy all these because it's pretty much going to be the exact same. So copy all these. This was from the add book route. We're going to pull back all that exact same data, Save this, close the template literal string, and then let's create our error object. We'll say const results equals await pool.query, pass in SQL, and then catch any errors that may happen. And then we'll say, and I'm just going to copy once again because it's almost all the same here. So if we have an error, console.error, otherwise not redirect. We're going to do res.render. And let's see what we're going to render here. We're going to do the books template. And if there was an error, we'll just pass in an empty array for books and an error message of there was an error. Please try that action again. Okay, and if there was not an error, we're going to need to pass in some data here. So let's do const template data. Open up a new object here. And it's going to be pretty similar to the add book. So let's come up here and let's grab all of this. It's going to be almost the exact same as this template data. So let's come back down to update book. Let's paste that in here. So we're going to have types, result of 1, languages. So the only difference actually is that we're running 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different queries, right? So we're going to get back an array of 5 arrays. So the first one being our book object. And since that's going to be an array of 1, it's going to be a little tricky to pull that out. So our first thing here is going to be our book, and that's going to be results of 0. And then this is weird, but another 1, because we have 2 arrays to go into to actually pull out that book object. So results of 0, and then these will all be incremented by 1. So 2, 3, 4. Results of 1, result of 2, and 3, and 4. And that'll get all of these properly passed into our template. And this will be res.render. And we're going to go ahead and render our new template here, which is update book. So res.render update book, and then pass in our template data object here. So we're passing in the book object and all the types, subtypes, languages, and locations. So let's go into update book. And this is going to be very similar to the add book template here. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of this, paste it in here. There are some notable differences, of course. First things first. So we're still going to have this link back to search, but this is going to be a little different here. So instead of saying this, let's just put update the information for, and then we're going to put in an EM tag for emphasis, and we're going to pass in the book's title so that they're aware of which book they are modifying. So update the information for book title below. Our action is also going to be a little different, of course, not insert book. It's going to be /book/update book by ID. And then, of course, we need to also pass in the ID. So book.id in curly braces. Method is still going to be post. Okay, and then we have form group, author. But instead of our search boxes being completely empty, we're going to actually pass the value. So let's add one more attribute, value, in here, since we already know what the book's current author is. So set the value to book.author. Same thing for title, value equals book.title. And then the drop downs here are much trickier because we need to be able to select which book type this current book is, right? So if it was like engineering or architecture, right? So we need to know which type it is, and we're going to need to actually write a custom handlebar helper, because let's look at what we need to kind of do here. So we're going to loop through all of our types like we did in the add book route, and we're going to create these option tags with the ID and the type. But we need to somehow know to set the selected attribute when we find the current type which matches our book. So we need to be able to do some like equality check, right? So the way that works is going to be something like this. Curly braces, hashtag, and then we're going to call our helper if_equal, and then we're going to pass, the first thing is going to be the ID of the current book type that we are on in our loop here, because we're going to loop through all of our types, right? And we're going to have the ID of each type as we loop all the way through them. So we're going to say if the current type's ID is equal to, and then we have to do // book type ID, because we passed in the current book's book type ID, book subtype ID, book language ID, etc. So if those are equal, then we know that we found our match and we can set selected. And then let's not forget to close out this helper method. So /if equal. And this, of course, is not going to work yet because we have to first write this helper function, because Handlebars, for some reason, out of the box does not come with something like this. So we'll look at doing that shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this entire thing here because it's going to be very similar for the rest of these drop downs. So for subtype, we're going to do that right here, and it's going to be book subtype ID is equal to the ID. Then for language, same thing, but it'll be book underscore language ID. And then location, similarly, except it'll be book underscore location ID. And then we have our submit button, and instead of add book, let's change this to say update book to be a little bit more appropriate. So there's our template. Let's see if this works. So we should be able to make our query and then render our update book template and pass the current book in along with all these types, subtypes, and all that. So let's come down here to a terminal, Control-C to stop the server, npm start to restart it. Let's do some testing here. So let's pull up the browser. I'll just do a refresh here, and let's see if we can click. Okay, so we haven't yet pointed these buttons to our new route, so I always forget something. Let's go back to the code here, and let's go to our books handlebar template here, and we gotta find those edit book buttons. This hyperlink here, this is the pencil button. So instead of the hashtag here, we'll do /books/update book, and we gotta pass the ID as a query string. So ID equals curly brace ID, and class will still be edit book. So copy this href here, and then down in edit book at the bottom, there it is. So we'll update this hashtag here to /books update book, pass in the ID. Next, we're going to need to go into our views, and let's create a new file in views, and I'll just call it helpers.js, and this is going to be where we're going to write all of our handlebar helper functions. So let's just do module.exports, and we'll say is equal helper, and we're going to pass in our two parameters to check, and then our options. I'll just do return A equals B. If it's equal, we'll do options.function this, else we'll do options.inverse of this. This is Handlebar's way of kind of checking for equality there. So save that file, and then we're going to need to do something in app.js, right? Because this is where we went to initialize the handlebar template engine. Yeah, so down here where we have app.engine, we're going to need to pass in, well, first off, we need to import the helpers. So come up to the top here, and let's do an import. So we'll do const HBS helpers, so handlebar helpers, require, and then let's point at that new file we created. So /views/helpers. So let's import that, and then let's copy this, come down here, and let's pass it into the app.engine. So under partials directory, we'll do helpers, and this is an object because we can have multiple helpers, and we're going to call it if underscore equal, set it equal to handlebar helpers dot is equal helper, because that's what we exported, right? If we go back to helpers, we exported the is equal helper. So that's what we're going to pass in there. Come back down, Control-C, npm start to restart the server, and now let's finally give that a shot. So once again, refresh, and let's click to edit a book, and there we go. So we got Foster and Partners. Well, let's go back. Okay, so let's test it out. So we have Foster and Partners. It is Architecture, Europe, and Blue Room, right? So if I click the edit, we should see that Architecture, Europe, English, and Blue Room. So perfect. Our handlebar helpers are working. So now let's look at doing the actual book update. So if we come back to our code, and we'll go into books.js, and we need to work on the update book post down here. So let's get rid of this, and we're going to pass in some request body data, right? So let's first pull out the ID, which will be rec.params.id, and then let's construct our book object. So we'll use the ID that we just pulled out here. Author, in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and copy because it's going to be very close to the add book, which is up here. Let's copy all this, come back down, paste it under the ID. So we have rec.body.author.trim, rec.body.title.trim, type, subtype, language, location. Okay, perfect. There's our book object. Let's come down here. We'll do error object, and let's write some SQL. So we're going to do update book set question mark for placeholder where ID equals, and then we're going to want to do some concatenation here, and we also need to make sure that we escape that. So pull.escape and then pass in the ID just in case we get some injection attacks. So close that. Const result equals await pull.query, pass in our SQL string and our book object, and we'll catch any errors. Set it equal to the error object, and then I'm going to copy once again because these are all so similar. Let's copy this. So if we have any errors, we'll do console.error, SQL error, and print it out, and then we're going to do a redirect to, let's do a template literal here. Template literal, we're going to redirect them to the /books/update book. So if there's an error, we'll take them back to the update book route, and we'll say ID equals, let's pass in the ID, and then an ampersand, and then success equals 0 because it was a failure. And let's go ahead and copy this, and we'll use that similar redirect down here, except success will equal 1 if it was all good and it all went through fine. Okay, so let's save that, come down here, do a Control-C, npm start. Let's pull up the browser again, and I'm just going to go ahead and go back to search, and I'm going to add a new book to do some testing. So we'll just say test book author, test book title, and I'll just add a new book. So success is 1, that worked. Let's go back to search, let's find that book. So test book, there it is. Let's try to modify this book. So I'll just say test book author name, test book title, new title, whatever. Change the type to engineering, subtype to civil, English, and office. So update book, success equals 1, perfect. Go back to search, let's find that book again, test book. Perfect, so it did the update. We're now English, engineering, civil, and office. Great, so update book is working. And let's also test small screen. So I'm gonna pull this over a bit so we got our cards here, and let's do another modification. So okay, it's looking good. Let's change this to name, last name, and new title, another title. Change the type to food and the location to main. Update book, success is 1. Back to search, let's find test book again. Last name, food, so English, okay, cool. So it's working on small screens as well. Now let's also test the remove book on small screen. So click there, we got our pop-up, click yes. Test book title has been removed. Okay, now let's see if we can find that again. Test book, and we don't have any results. So it looks like it's all working. Let's pull this back out to a larger screen and come back to the code. And that should do it for this video. In the next video, we're going to kind of look at how to clean up our client side and then clean up our styles a bit more to make it kind of look a little bit better. And then we can also add one more handlebar template for the error screen, right? So currently, if we go back to the page here and we hit some route that doesn't exist, like some random route, we get this kind of not very good looking or formatted 404 page. So let's look at how we can do a custom 404 page with some image maybe and kind of style this a little bit better. So let's come back quickly and do our git commit stuff. So come down here, do a Control-C. Let's do git add dot and then git commit -m, finish, delete book and update book routes, add client side JavaScript, to make fetch call to delete book. Commit that, git push origin master to push it up to the repository. So thanks again for watching. I'll have a link to the next video in the description, and I hope to see you all there. Thank you very much.